Welcome, dear listener, to History One. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so that you never miss the next hidden story from the shadows of history. What you are about to hear is not the polished tale of kings and queens written in gold and marble. No, this is the story whispered in corridors, hidden beneath velvet cloaks, guarded by silence, and buried in fear. This is Cloak of Secrets, dangerous secrets hidden under the cloak of power. Imagine for a moment, the chandeliers glimmer, the halls echo with music, and nobility dance in silks and pearls. Yet behind their powdered faces and jeweled crowns lie truths so dark, so perilous, that even loyal servants dared not speak them aloud. Poison in goblets, hidden lovers in locked chambers, secret letters burned at midnight, and alliances sealed not by trust but by blackmail and blood. Tonight, we peel back that cloak, and what you will hear may change forever how you see the dazzling courts of Europe. It begins in the late 16th century, in the courts of France. To the common eye, King Henry III was a ruler torn between religious wars, political intrigues, and the splendor of his court. But in the shadows, whispers followed him. He was known not only for his love of jewels and extravagant attire, but also for his mysterious minions, young noblemen whose beauty was as striking as their ambition. Behind the glittering feasts and theatrical masks, there lingered suspicion. Were these companions merely courtiers, or something more? Rivals accused the king of indulgences that, if spoken openly, could have shaken the very foundation of his crown. But that was only the surface. Beneath the cloak of his reign lay something darker: letters exchanged in secret, codes hidden in prayer books, and rumors of clandestine pacts with foreign powers. The king had to balance on a razor's edge. One slip, one revelation, and France could erupt not from war, but from scandal that no army could suppress. And this was not only France. Across Europe, royal families were weaving webs of secrets. In England, Elizabeth I presented herself as the Virgin Queen, untouchable and above mortal weakness. Yet, behind closed doors, courtiers whispered of hidden lovers, forbidden passions, and heirs who might or might not exist. To admit to weakness was to surrender power, and so, the cloak was drawn tighter. But this cloak was not made of silk. It was woven of lies, betrayals, and dangerous bargains. In Spain, the Habsburg dynasty carried bloodlines so tightly interwoven that whispers of deformity and madness began to circulate. Behind palace walls, physicians were sworn to secrecy, priests heard confessions that could never be revealed, and servants risked their lives if they so much as hinted at the truth. To the world, the Habsburgs displayed majesty and divine right. In the shadows, they hid the price of their own lineage. And what of the secret societies? The cloaked figures who met by candlelight in underground chambers, exchanging vows of loyalty that surpassed crown and church alike? Some nobles were said to have belonged to forbidden orders, seeking knowledge and power beyond the reach of ordinary men. To speak of such things was dangerous, yet traces remain, scattered in letters, symbols carved into stone, and testimonies recorded before the Inquisition. The deeper one looks, the more one realizes. Europe's royalty did not merely rule by power and divine right, they ruled by secrets, and those secrets when revealed could destroy entire kingdoms. But let us not rush, for to uncover the hidden truths beneath this cloak, we must take each thread, carefully, and follow it to where it leads. And so, dear listener, we begin our long journey into the hidden lives of Europe's nobility. From the glittering halls of Versailles to the dark towers of the Habsburgs, from the whispered scandals of Tudor England to the forbidden rituals of secret brotherhoods, the cloak will be lifted, piece by piece. What was concealed in shadows will come to light. The first thread we shall follow leads us into the court of Versailles, a palace shimmering like a dream, yet crawling with secrets that could ruin even the most powerful. To the outside world, King Louis XIV, the Sunday King, appeared untouchable, a monarch whose very presence radiated authority. He designed Versailles not merely as a palace, but as a theatre of power. Every mirror, every corridor, every garden was crafted to remind his subjects that he was the center of their world. But beneath this gilded facade lay intrigues so dangerous that even the mighty Sun King could not always control them. One such intrigue centered on what history would later call the affair of the poisons. At first, it began as whispers in the salons of Paris, noble women seeking charms and potions from fortune-tellers, a quiet underworld of sorcerers and alchemists supplying powders, brews, and black masses. But as the whispers grew, they reached the palace itself. Suddenly, rumors spread that members of the nobility, some close to the king, were dabbling in poisonings, dark rituals, and even infant sacrifices, all to gain power, wealth, or the affections of a lover. Louis XIV could not ignore such whispers. If the truth spread unchecked, it would not only tarnish his court, it could destroy the illusion of divine power that he so carefully crafted. He ordered secret investigations. Nobles who had smiled gracefully at his banquets were suddenly arrested, dragged into interrogation chambers, and confronted with accusations of witchcraft and murder. One of the most notorious figures was Madame de Montespan, once the king's beloved mistress. Behind her dazzling charm, suspicions grew. Had she sought the help of sorcerers to maintain the king's love? Had she, as some claimed, participated in forbidden rites that mocked the very mass itself, though never convicted? In public, the shadow of these accusations was enough to unravel her influence. Yet, Louis XIV faced a dilemma. To expose everything would mean scandal beyond repair. To hide it risked the rot spreading within his court. And so, files were locked away, trials were silenced, and names erased. The affair of the poisons officially ended, but its secrets were buried rather than destroyed. This was the cloak of secrets at work. Behind silks and lace, power was balanced on lies and whispers, and Versailles was not alone in this. In Austria, the Habsburgs lived with a secret that could not be hidden forever. The curse of their bloodline. Generations of intermarriage, meant to preserve dynastic control, created physical deformities and mental instability. The most infamous was the Habsburg jaw, a protruding chin so severe that some kings could barely chew their food or close their mouths properly. But what was worse was what could not be seen: signs of madness, fragile health, and early deaths. The people believed the Habsburgs ruled by divine right. Yet behind palace walls, physicians struggled to keep the dynasty alive, concealing what nature had twisted. Documents were locked in archives, and servants who spoke too freely risked their heads. It was as if the very blood of the dynasty carried its own curse, a curse concealed under crowns and titles, yet whispered about in every corridor of Europe. And still, across the Channel in England, another cloak of secrets was being drawn. Queen Elizabeth I, Gloriana, presented herself as untouchable, married only to her kingdom, but in the shadows, men and women speculated endlessly. Did she secretly love Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester? Was she perhaps not so untouched as she claimed? And what of the mysterious death of Dudley's wife, Amy Robsart, who was found at the bottom of a staircase with a broken neck? Accident, suicide, or murder arranged to free Dudley for the Queen's love? Elizabeth silenced the scandal with her iron will. But in taverns, in letters, and in whispers among her courtiers, the story refused to die. This is how it was in Europe's courts. Every smile could hide betrayal, every alliance carried secrets unspoken. And every ruler wore not just a crown but a cloak of secrets, heavy with lies, fear, and dangerous truths. What happened in candlelit chambers, what bargains were made in whispers, and what passions drove kings and queens in the dark, these were things never written in official chronicles, yet they shaped the fate of nations. And as we continue our journey, we shall see just how far these secrets could reach, sometimes deciding wars, sometimes destroying dynasties, and sometimes leaving behind mysteries unsolved to this very day. Let us step deeper now, into the shadowed chambers where secrets shape destiny. For not all treachery was born of lust or whispered scandals. Some secrets were crafted with ink and daggers, hidden in letters that could cost a throne. Consider the fate of Mary, Queen of Scots. To the world, she was the tragic rival of Elizabeth I, a queen caught in the storm of politics and faith. But hidden beneath her graceful letters and diplomatic words was a secret correspondence, ciphered messages exchanged with Catholic plotters who dreamed of replacing Elizabeth with Mary. These letters, smuggled in beer barrels and stitched into garments, carried not just words, but daggers aimed at a crown. Elizabeth's spymaster, Sir Francis Walsingham, lived for such secrets. He turned espionage into an art, weaving a network of informants who could pierce even the most guarded cloisters. When Mary's secret letters were finally intercepted and decoded, they revealed her approval of a plot to assassinate Elizabeth. This revelation sealed her fate. The cloak of secrecy became a shroud, and Mary was led to the executioner's block. Yet her death was not merely the end of a queen, it was a warning to all nobility. Secret could be a weapon, but once exposed, they demanded blood. But England was hardly alone in such games. In Italy, where the noble houses of the Renaissance wielded both beauty and poison, secrecy was an art form. The Borgia family, infamous for their ambition, were whispered to keep vials of poison disguised as holy relics. Banquets at their palaces were said to be lethal, with goblets prepared for guests who had outlived their usefulness. Whether myth or truth, the shadow of poison clung to their name, reminding Europe that in the courts of power, death could be served on a golden plate. Across the Alps, in the glittering courts of the German states, another kind of secret festered. Forbidden societies and clandestine brotherhoods. Among nobles and princes, curiosity about hidden knowledge grew. Some whispered of alchemical experiments, others of occult practices designed to glimpse the future. The lines between science and sorcery blurred, and behind locked doors, experiments were conducted by candlelight, some with noble patrons, others with the nobility themselves. One German duke was rumored to have created a secret chamber filled with mechanical devices that imitated life. Visitors who dared enter spoke of strange clockwork birds that sang without breath, or statues that moved as if alive. Was this merely a showcase of engineering, or, as some whispered, an attempt to touch forbidden realms of creation itself? The truth was hidden, for such pursuits could invite accusations of heresy and the wrath of both church and empire. Secrecy, then, was not merely survival, it was currency. The ability to conceal could mean the difference between rule and ruin. Letters sealed with wax, hidden doors within palaces, cryptic codes etched in the margins of books, these became tools as vital as armies. And as Europe moved into the 17th century, the weight of these secrets only grew heavier. Wars were fought not just with swords, but with betrayals whispered in the dark. Ambassadors carried double loyalties, mistresses whispered state secrets in silken sheets, and monarchs played games of deceit that stretched across continents. Take, for example, the 30 Years' War, a conflict that seemed to be about religion, yet beneath it lay layers of secret treaties, bribes, and shifting alliances. Kings who swore loyalty to one faith whispered promises to another. Nobles who rode to war by day plotted with the enemy by night. It was a time when truth itself was dangerous, and survival meant learning to hide it. And still, behind the roar of battles and the thunder of cannons, the most perilous wars were fought in silence, in hidden chambers, in secret letters, and in the delicate game of concealing what must never be known. This was the true cloak of secrets, a garment woven across Europe, covering kings and queens alike, shielding their power but binding them in lies. And as we move further, we will uncover how some secrets did not remain hidden, how they burst into the light with catastrophic force, altering the destiny of entire nations. Now let us draw the cloak tighter, for the next layer of secrets will lead us into chambers where even servants feared to breathe too loudly. We enter the Bourbon dynasty of France, where grandeur and excess masked intrigues that threatened the very foundation of monarchy. By the time of Louis XV, Versailles was no longer merely a palace, it was a labyrinth of secrets. The Sun King had died, leaving behind not only his glory but also a legacy of hidden corruption. Louis XV inherited not only the throne but the burden of scandal. To the public, he was a charming monarch, adored for his grace and eloquence. Yet behind the gilded mirrors of Versailles, a darker truth spread. He maintained a clandestine network of lovers, a secret harem known only to those closest to the throne. Hidden in the shadowed apartments of Versailles was the Parc aux Cerfs, a discreet residence where young women, some barely out of childhood, were brought to satisfy the king's desires. The arrangement was carefully veiled, contracts were drawn, payments made, and silence purchased. Mothers sometimes offered their daughters willingly, hoping for favor or fortune, but for others, it was less choice than coercion. The king's ministers ensured that these secrets remained buried, for if the truth spilled into the streets of Paris, the monarchy would have drowned in outrage long before the revolution arrived. And yet, rumors always slipped through. Pamphlets began to circulate in the taverns and marketplaces, pamphlets filled with satirical verses and crude drawings mocking the king's private life. These writings, though forbidden, spread like wildfire. They painted the king as a debauched tyrant, more concerned with lust than justice. The seeds of distrust were planted, watered by secrecy and lies. But Louis XV was not the only ruler whose cloak was heavy with such shadows. Across the Channel, in the court of King Charles II of England, scandal was almost a daily spectacle. Known as the Merry Monarch, Charles filled his court with mistresses, illegitimate children, and late-night revelries. But behind the laughter and music lay a dangerous truth. His alliances were not only with women but with foreign powers. Charles, always in need of money, secretly negotiated with France, promising to favor Catholicism in exchange for financial support. To the English people, fiercely Protestant, this was a betrayal that could never be spoken aloud. So the letters were hidden, the payments disguised, and the truth cloaked in layers of deception. Should the secret have emerged fully, it might have sparked rebellion and toppled the monarchy anew, so soon after the trauma of civil war and regicide. Meanwhile, in the courts of the German principalities, another kind of secrecy thrived. Princes and dukes, outwardly pious, maintained private collections of forbidden books, works on alchemy, astrology, and the occult. By day, they paraded as guardians of faith. By night, they experimented with powders, metals, and symbols, searching for the philosopher's stone or the elixir of life. Some succeeded in creating marvels of chemistry and early science. Others, it was whispered, summoned things best left unnamed. One such tale tells of a Bavarian count who supposedly entered into a pact with shadowy figures claiming knowledge of ancient mysteries. He built a chamber without windows, lit only by a single lamp, and there he conducted rites that his servants dared not describe. When he died suddenly, his body was said to have been found unmarked, but his chamber walls blackened as if burned from within. His heirs ordered the room sealed, never to be opened again. These are the stories that official history seldom records, for they belong to the world of secrets, where truth and rumor intertwine until neither can be separated. But whether whispered in fear or written in code, these hidden truths shaped how rulers lived, how they ruled, and how they fell. For the cloak of secrets could never be removed, it could only grow heavier, and as centuries passed, the weight became unbearable. Soon, we shall see how these secrets, once hidden in shadows, erupted into light with devastating force. For when the people discovered what their rulers had concealed, crowns toppled, palaces burned, and centuries of royal power came crashing down. Let us now move closer to the final centuries before Europe's thrones began to tremble. For here, the cloak of secrets grew so heavy, it began to drag kings and queens toward their doom. The 18th century was a time of opulence, but also of whispers. And nowhere were the whispers louder than in Versailles under Marie Antoinette. To the people of France, she became the very symbol of extravagance, yet beneath the diamond necklaces and silk gowns lay layers of scandal carefully woven into silence. One of the most infamous was the affair of the diamond necklace. It began with a glittering jewel, a necklace so magnificent it seemed fit only for a goddess. Jewelers sought to sell it to the queen, but Marie Antoinette refused. It was too costly, and she already faced criticism for excess. Yet schemers saw an opportunity. A conwoman, posing as a confidant of the queen, convinced Cardinal de Rohan that he could regain royal favor by secretly arranging to purchase the necklace for her. The plot was elaborate, involving forged letters, clandestine meetings, and a woman disguised as the Queen herself in the gardens of Versailles. When the truth emerged, Marie Antoinette had played no part. Yet the public believed otherwise. They whispered that the Queen was greedy, deceitful, and manipulative. Pamphlets flooded Paris, painting her as Madame Déficit. The scandal, born of lies and secrecy, stained her reputation beyond repair. Here, the cloak of secrets did not merely hide it strangled, for what was hidden in shadows now poisoned the air in daylight. And when the revolution erupted, those rumors, those pamphlets, those whispers were fuel for the fire that would drag king and queen to the guillotine. But France was not alone in wearing such a cloak. In Russia, the court of the Romanovs was a web of secrets so dense it seemed every chamber echoed with conspiracies. Empress Catherine the Great, celebrated for her intellect and reforms, was pursued by rumors that clung to her long after her death. Her many lovers, her secret political maneuvers, and her careful manipulation of allies and enemies made her both admired and feared. Catherine had seized the throne in 1762, after her husband, Peter III, was overthrown, and many whispered murdered under suspicious circumstances. Officially, Peter died in captivity, but in the shadows, people spoke of strangulation, of a plot orchestrated by Catherine's allies while she stood conveniently apart. Whether she ordered it or merely turned away, the truth was locked behind palace walls. Yet the rumor itself gave her reign a shadowed edge, as though her crown rested not only on power but on blood. Even centuries later, stories of Catherine's private life, many invented by enemies, were repeated endlessly, painting her as immoral, insatiable, unnatural. In reality, she was a ruler of immense strength and vision. Yet the whispers never stopped. Her enemies knew well. A secret, or even the suggestion of one, could wound more deeply than any sword. Meanwhile, in England, the Hanoverian kings struggled with secrets of their own. George III, remembered for losing the American colonies, carried within him a more tragic cloak, the secret of his madness. At first, it was hidden from the public. Strange outbursts, incoherent ramblings, nights without sleep. Physicians were summoned quietly, treatments applied in silence, and courtiers sworn to secrecy. But as his condition worsened, the truth could no longer be contained. The king's illness became a matter of state, shaking the very foundations of monarchy. Here, the cloak was not woven of lust or scandal, but of frailty, of the dangerous truth that kings were not gods, but flesh and blood, subject to the same torments as common men. The more we peel back the layers, the clearer the pattern becomes. Across Europe, from Versailles to St. Petersburg, from London to Vienna, rulers depended on secrecy as much as on armies. The hidden affairs, the unspoken illnesses, the concealed pacts, the silent scandals, these were as vital to monarchy as crowns and coronations. But secrecy, like a poison, works slowly. At first it shields, then it corrodes, and finally it destroys. The cloak of secrets had protected Europe's nobility for centuries. Yet by the dawn of the 19th century, it had grown too heavy. The people had learned to see through the silks and jewels, to hear the lies beneath the anthems, and once the cloak was torn away, the world would never again look upon kings and queens with the same awe. And so, we step into the 19th century, when the shimmering mask of monarchy was cracking, and the cloak of secrets weighed heavier than ever. What had once been whispers behind velvet curtains now leaked into newspapers, pamphlets, and the cafes of Europe. Secrets that once could topple a noble in silence now exploded in public, shaking thrones with every revelation. One such secret lay in the very heart of Austria's empire. The Habsburgs, long haunted by their cursed bloodline, tried desperately to maintain the illusion of strength. Emperor Franz Joseph, I ruled with stern dignity, but within his household, tragedy stalked quietly. His beloved Empress Elizabeth, known to the world as Sisi, became both an icon and a prisoner. She was celebrated for her beauty, but behind palace walls, she was consumed by melancholy, obsession with her appearance, and a restless soul that fled from Vienna whenever possible. Sisi's life was carefully staged for the public, but diaries and letters reveal a hidden torment. She avoided her duties, distanced herself from her husband, and grieved endlessly after the suicide of her only son, Crown Prince Rudolf. Rudolf himself carried his own cloak of secrets. Charismatic, intelligent, but deeply troubled, he clashed with his father and sought solace in forbidden affairs. His most dangerous secret came to light in Mayerling, 1889. There, Rudolf was found dead alongside his young lover, Baroness Mary Vetsera. Officially, it was declared a suicide pact, but the details were shrouded in silence. Locked files, contradictory testimonies, and a desperate cover-up by the imperial court. Was it truly a lover's suicide? Or had Rudolf, with his liberal leanings, become too great a threat to the empire, silenced by forces far beyond romance? The truth was buried with him, and Mayerling became a wound that festered in whispers. Across Europe, similar shadows lengthened. In Victorian England, Queen Victoria presented an image of strict morality and family devotion. Yet beneath this iron facade, secrets stirred. Her deep attachment to her Scottish servant, John Brown, sparked endless speculation. After the death of Prince Albert, Victoria leaned heavily on Brown for companionship, trust, and perhaps something more. Rumors of an inappropriate relationship, even of a secret marriage, circulated in hushed tones. To protect the Queen's dignity, much evidence was destroyed after her death, but the whispers never ceased. Meanwhile, Victoria's descendants, spread across Europe through strategic marriages, carried her blood into almost every royal house. Yet this unity concealed a devastating secret: haemophilia, the royal disease. Passed unknowingly from Victoria's line, it afflicted sons and heirs, leaving them fragile, vulnerable, and often dead before their time. In Russia, the young Tsarevich Alexei, son of Nicholas II, inherited the condition. His illness was hidden from the public at all costs, for to reveal the heir's weakness was to endanger the entire Romanov dynasty. It was this desperate secret that opened the doors to one of the most mysterious figures in modern history, Grigory Rasputin. A wandering mystic, Rasputin gained the trust of Empress Alexandra by seemingly easing Alexei's suffering. But his presence at court became a scandal in itself. His influence, his rumored debauchery, and his strange hold over the Romanovs fueled a storm of gossip and hatred. The truth of Rasputin's power, whether spiritual, political, or merely psychological, remains debated. But his shadow was enough to stain the royal family's reputation and hasten their fall. This is how the cloak of secrets evolved in the 19th century. Once, it had been a tool of survival. Now, it became a trap. The very act of concealment bred suspicion, and suspicion turned to rebellion. By the dawn of the 20th century, the world was changing. Monarchs could no longer rely on the silence of servants or the obedience of subjects. The press dug relentlessly, revolutions burned at the edges of empires, and the people demanded truth. And when the cloak finally slipped, when the secrets spilled into the open, the results were catastrophic. Thrones crumbled, dynasties ended, and centuries of royal illusion dissolved in blood and fire. Yet even then, some secrets remained locked away, buried in archives, whispered in memoirs, hidden behind palace walls. And to this day, history still asks, what truths lay hidden beneath that cloak, never to be revealed? The 20th century dawned like a storm breaking upon the fragile palaces of Europe. For centuries, monarchs had shielded themselves behind jewels, ceremonies, and above all, secrets. But the cloak that once protected them now betrayed them, for when the people discovered what lay beneath, they saw not gods on thrones, but mortals weak, corrupt, and vulnerable. The most shattering example came with the fall of the Romanovs in Russia. Outwardly, they appeared as the chosen family of God, ruling a vast empire by divine right. But behind the gilded doors of the Winter Palace, secrecy consumed them. The greatest secret was the illness of the young heir, Tsarevich Alexei. Born with haemophilia, a single wound could bleed him to death. This truth was hidden from the Russian people at all costs. The Tsar and Tsarina feared that if the heir was known to be weak, it would embolden their enemies and destabilize the monarchy. Thus, they turned in desperation to Rasputin, the mad monk, whose mysterious influence seemed to ease the boy's suffering. But the price of this secret was ruinous. Rumors of Rasputin's debauchery and his hold over the Tsarina spread through St. Petersburg like wildfire. Pamphlets portrayed him as a devil in holy robes, controlling the throne through sorcery and seduction. The more the royal family tried to conceal the truth, the darker the whispers became. By the time revolution came in 1917, the monarchy was not only seen as corrupt, it was believed to be cursed. The cloak of secrecy that had shielded the Romanovs for years was torn away, and beneath it, the people saw only decay. In Austria, the Habsburgs faced their own unraveling. After the Mayerling tragedy and decades of hidden scandals, their empire staggered into the First World War under Emperor Franz Joseph's successor, Karl I. Here too, secrecy ruled. Austria's leaders concealed their weaknesses, their desperation for peace, and their inability to control the empire's fracturing parts. When defeat came, it was swift and merciless. The centuries-old dynasty collapsed, leaving behind whispers of betrayal, cover-ups, and documents locked away in state archives. But even in Britain, where monarchy survived, secrecy haunted the crown. The early 20th century saw the rise of mass media, and with it, the ability to peer behind palace walls. During the First World War, King George V faced a dilemma. His family bore the German names Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, a dangerous association, when British soldiers were dying in trenches against the Kaiser. And so, in a carefully concealed decision, he abandoned centuries of lineage and adopted a new identity, the House of Windsor. The people never saw the strings being pulled, only the new cloak presented before them. Yet the greatest royal scandal of Britain would come 2 decades later, with Edward VIII. Charming, modern, and admired by the public, he carried a secret that could not be tolerated: his love for Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee. Behind closed doors, advisors and ministers whispered frantically, aware that the king's desire threatened the crown itself. For months, the truth was hidden, denied, smoothed over. But when it could no longer be concealed, Edward was forced to abdicate in 1936, the first monarch in English history to step down willingly. It was not only the crown that weighed upon Europe's nobles. In every country, aristocratic families scrambled to preserve their wealth and status, even as revolution, democracy, and war tore away their privileges. They hid fortunes in Swiss banks, concealed alliances with fascist regimes, and buried truths that might brand them as traitors. Some collaborated with occupiers in silence, others resisted secretly, their names erased until long after their deaths. The cloak of secrets had changed form. No longer was it simply about lovers hidden in bedchambers or poisons in goblets. Now, it was about survival in a modern world, where secrecy could mean collaboration, betrayal, or silent resistance. And yet, for all that was exposed in the 20th century, for all that crumbled under revolution and war, some secrets still remain locked in sealed archives, guarded by royal families, or erased from records altogether. There are whispers of illegitimate heirs, of fortunes stolen and hidden, of crimes quietly pardoned to preserve the illusion of dignity. The monarchy that survives today wears its cloak lighter, for in an age of cameras and relentless press, secrets are harder to keep. But the past reminds us that power has always been dangerous, and that beneath the most splendid cloak lies not purity but peril. For history is not only the tale of what was revealed, it is also the echo of what was hidden, and of those secrets too dangerous to ever be spoken aloud. And so, dear listener, we come to the end of our journey through the shadows, from the courts of France to the palaces of Russia, from Tudor intrigue to Habsburg curses. The cloak of secrets has always followed the nobility and royalty of Europe. It shielded them, it deceived them, and finally, it destroyed them. Remember, power never comes without secrets, and every secret, sooner or later, demands its price. This has been Cloak of Secrets, dangerous secrets hidden under the cloak of power. Thank you for listening with us here on History One. If you wish to hear more hidden stories from the shadows of history, don't forget to subscribe and join us next time as we lift the veil once again.